Okay, to make a short version of that, when it comes to constructor chains, you know, what you see here is pretty much possible. Oh shit, went too far. Starting with this parent, then this daughter, then the son, which is, at the same level of inheritance. Um, it's calling a constructor chain directly here. Or a son, which I do have a destructor defined here too. And I also assign this default constructor to son. So it's not necessary, like in this daughter class. Okay, yeah, this daughter class, no, you have a default constructor here, which doesn't call anything else in the chain. What the fuck I was looking at. But then you have the son class, which calls this overloaded constructors, from itself and its parent. But this isn't necessary. You can just call one of them. And then a son's default constructor and a destructor. And then I got a grandson class derived from the son class, so this is layer 3. And it's got a default constructor and an overloaded default constructor, and an overloaded default constructor which calls the overloaded son's constructor chain. And remember, its constructor will call the parent constructor the overloaded constructor too when you call this version of the constructor. Then I got another constructor which is overloaded and much as this first one is, and I was attempting to call the chain, but finally I just did it this way. So if you look at the calling code down here, that's what we get. Okay, and let me run it. Okay, so you can see what the results of these various call chains were. Firstly for the daughter, then for the son, then for the grandson, calling the default constructor chain, and for the grandson's overloaded constructor, and you can see that the call order is it calls the deepest layer. In other words, the base class constructor is called first, then the first derived class, and the second derived class, and so on. And again, I think that the destructors are called in reverse order. And then for overloaded 2 function, what you see here, that's called next, and so that's calling the entire chain of overloaded constructors. Firstly this one, secondly this one for the son, and then finally the one for the grandson. But it still, interestingly enough, passes that data up because it's actually called from in the class to pass in those parameters, but then it passes that data along and then it unfolds. It's almost like a recursive behavior in a way, because it's like a telescoping thing out, that this ends up being called first, and then this one, and then this one, even though this was the first function to actually technically be passed information to. But then finally we call the third overloaded constructor, which really just calls the default constructors of the parent and the son. So, but basically that's how it works, for what it's worth. So, if you just wanted a quick and dirty reference, and then by the way, we'll press a key, then the destructors are called for all the objects we created, and there are several objects of the son class where I had that destructor in it. So there you go.